Jesus may have risen on Easter Sunday. But Donald Trump and JD Vance? Not quite. Their approval ratings are still 6 feet under. And just when America thought the Easter news cycle couldn't get weirder, the Pope died.
Carissimi fratelli e sorelle, con profondo dolore devo annunciare la morte del nostro Santo Padre Francesco.
Pope Francis is gone, and his death wasn't just a spiritual moment. It was a political earthquake, one that hit right as the Republican Party is clinging to a version of Christianity that even the Vatican had started distancing itself from. Something happened in the Vatican, and almost no one noticed. Pope Francis might be dead, but before he passed, he made a quiet move that's sending shockwaves through global politics. He snubbed JD Vance. He condemned Trump's immigration plans as a grave sin.
A person who only thinks about making walls again and again and not making bridges is not a Christian.
Pope would have only wished and prayed that Donald Trump would have been president.
And now, the world is left trying to decode his final message. Was it a warning, a rebuke, a power move? Because what he didn't say out loud might be even more important than what he did. Stick around, because what happens next could reshape not just the church, but even the American election. For years, Christian conservatives were the engine behind Republican power. Back in the 80s, Ronald Reagan cut a deal with evangelical leaders. You give me votes, I'll give you policies. That alliance helped the GOP win elections, stack the courts, and dominate Washington for decades. But now, that relationship is falling apart, fast. If you want proof, just look back at this past January. Trump and Vance were back in the White House, ready to crown themselves champions of Christian America. But the vibe wasn't righteous revival. It was spiritual rot. And Pope Francis, right up until his death, seemed to know it.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. Gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families. But the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors.
That footage still hits hard. Bishop Marianne Boud, standing firm yet visibly shaken, delivered a plea that echoed through the halls of power, not just to the president, but to the soul of a fractured nation. Her words, rooted in compassion and courage, captured what many now believe the Republican Party has lost, a moral compass. In many ways, she embodies the quiet exodus of Christians who are no longer willing to co-sign political cruelty wrapped in scripture. And with Pope Francis now gone, the timing of his final, not-so-subtle rebukes feels almost prophetic. The split between the Republican Party and conservative Christians didn't happen overnight. It began to rupture around 2008. That's when Democrats like Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton started to speak more comfortably and credibly about their faith. And suddenly, the moral authority the GOP had claimed for decades started to crumble. All of this unfolded alongside another cultural shift, one that terrified the old guard of the GOP. Women were demanding control over their own bodies and reproductive choices. The fight for equal pay gained momentum, and LGBTQ Americans were pushing, loudly and unapologetically, for basic human rights and legal recognition. It was a reckoning, one that exposed just how performative Republican morality really was. And through it all, enter Donald Trump, a man who, by any biblical measure, should have been politically untouchable for Christian voters, not in a good way. A serial philanderer allegedly accused of rape, with multiple divorces, hush-money scandals, and a lifestyle that makes Sodom and Gomorrah look like a youth retreat. But somehow, the religious right decided he was God's chosen vessel. The hypocrisy was deafening, and while there's more to say and more dirt to dig, that's a story for another video. Because right now, this story belongs to Easter, the holiest of Christian holidays, a celebration of resurrection, of hope, of mercy. And until his final breath, Pope Francis embodied exactly that kind of Christianity, one rooted in empathy, not exclusion. He wasn't interested in politicians who threw around Bible verses while slashing food stamps. He wanted them held to actual moral standards, not judged by how many tax cuts they could pass or how many God Bless America soundbites they could squeeze into a stump speech. And for all his diplomacy, Pope Francis knew when to speak through action. That's likely why, just before his death, he delivered what can only be described as a holy middle finger, aimed squarely at the likes of JD Vance and Donald Trump. According to the Daily Beast, shortly before his death, Pope Francis personally snubbed JD and Usha Vance during their visit to Vatican City. Vance, a recent convert to Catholicism, was scheduled for a private, in-depth meeting with the Pope to discuss global issues. But instead, Francis sent Cardinal Pietro Parolin in his place. A powerful figure, sure, but not the man they came to see. Some tried to chalk it up to the Pope's poor health. He had been hospitalized in the weeks leading up. But that excuse doesn't hold. Francis still made time to meet King Charles shortly after. He wasn't too sick. He just had no interest in entertaining Vance's version of Christian politics. Maybe JD and Usha Vance should have just stayed home and joined the White House Easter egg roll. Though, with today's egg prices, that probably wouldn't have helped their image either. All jokes aside, this was a papal smackdown, rare, pointed and personal. Popes don't usually wade into politics like this, but Francis didn't just criticize policies. He called out politicians by name. And now, with his death, those words hit even harder. For Democrats, this should be seen as an opening, a moral moment. Easter is about love, redemption, and rising from the dead. Maybe it's time for the party to resurrect something too, American dignity, the kind that extends compassion across party lines, across borders, and especially to the most vulnerable among us. And who knows, that kind of message might just bring them back to power too. With Pope Francis gone, the Vatican now enters one of the most politically and spiritually consequential transitions in decades, the election of the next pope. And let's be clear, this is not just a Catholic issue. The outcome will echo far beyond Rome. It will ripple into Washington, reshape the global conversation on faith and politics, and potentially either empower or deflate the Christian nationalist surge currently gripping parts of America. Right now, two camps are quietly battling for the future of the church. On one side, the traditionalists. Backed by ultra-conservative bishops, many of them aligned with nationalist leaders like Viktor Orban, they're pushing for a hardline successor, someone who rolls back Francis's progressive reforms, clamps down on LGBTQ inclusion, and re-establishes a more authoritarian top-down Catholicism. If they win, the Vatican may no longer criticize MAGA ideology, it may mirror it. On the other side, the reformists. Cardinals appointed by Francis, many from the global south, who believe the Church's future lies in compassion, diversity, and social justice. A pope from this camp would likely continue Francis's confrontational stance against xenophobia, economic inequality, and authoritarian leaders, including those in the United States. And American politics is watching. If the next pope turns the Vatican into a mirror of MAGA Christianity, it will embolden Trump, JD Vance, and others to push their theocratic agenda even harder, now with spiritual cover. Expect louder attacks on immigration, reproductive rights, and public education, all draped in religious language. But if the College of Cardinals chooses someone who walks in Francis's footsteps, or even more boldly challenges nationalism, it could trigger a major backlash. GOP leaders will ramp up their war on the Vatican, just like they already have on woke corporations, universities, and anyone else who challenges their version of America. So make no mistake, this isn't just about who leads the Catholic Church next. It's about who gets to define the moral center of global Christianity, and whether that center resists power or blesses it. The conclave may happen behind closed doors, but its consequences will be very public. And in America, those consequences could shape the next election, the future of the Republican Party, and the fate of democracy itself. Pope Francis is gone, and with him, one of the last global moral authorities willing to stand up, unapologetically, to power. His final months were not quiet. They were confrontational, purposeful. His sharp words against Trump, his open disdain for JD Vance's hollow theology, and his unapologetic defense of the poor, the migrant, the queer, and the voiceless. That was no accident. It was a warning shot, a last stand. And now the question isn't just what kind of church he leaves behind, it's who will lead it next. The coming conclave will be about more than doctrine or dogma. It will be a global referendum on the future of faith itself. Will the church fall back into the arms of nationalist authoritarianism, offering religious cover to politicians like Trump and Vance as they push Christian supremacy in the US? Or will it double down on Francis's vision, a Christianity that speaks truth to power rather than bending the knee to it? This moment matters because what happens in Rome will not stay in Rome. It will shape the tone of American politics, the rhetoric of Republican campaigns, and the moral framing of the next election cycle. If the Vatican crowns a hardliner, the MAGA movement will claim divine validation. They'll push further, louder, harder. But if the next pope stands in Francis's shadow, or steps even further into the light, he may become a new global counterweight to Christian nationalism. The spiritual vacuum left by Francis's death isn't theoretical, it's political. And who fills it will help decide not just the future of the church, but of democracy itself. The altar is empty, the cassock unworn, the incense still hanging in the air. And the question that hangs over all of us is this: when faith meets power, again, who will kneel and who will stand? If you made it this far, then you know this isn't just about religion, it's about truth, power, and what kind of future we're all about to walk into. So let me ask you, where do you stand? Drop a comment below. Do you think the next pope will resist authoritarianism or fall in line with it? Should religion have any place in modern politics? And what do you want faith to look like in America today? Like the video if you believe moral leadership matters, and share it if you think more people need to hear this before the next election. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're not done asking hard questions, not by a long shot.